And so for me as an African woman, I think, what I find to be consistent in almost every sphere that I show up in, is that, the bodies of African women are probably the most weaponized, the most legislated and disempowered in the world. And so I think that as we have this conversation today, it's important to think not just about the legislation that's written, the way that we sort of traditionally think about legislation, but in developing countries, particularly in some African countries, there's two parallel systems of legislation, right? So there's a traditional system that many people adhere to, and also what we think of as the civil law. And so both of these intersect in many ways to continue to disempower women in through the legislation and through what's written into our laws. It's in our customs, it's in our traditions. And so I think it's important that we also recognize the import of these double or parallel systems on the lives and the mindsets of women. And so I think what we tend to see is that you have generations of women that are disempowering themselves in some ways as a result of having this assault on their mindset and their humanity in many ways. And so the perceptions of themselves and what they believe that they can bring to the table is just an additional layer that we're having to deal with as activists and as advocates. And so for us, I think it's important that we're not just speaking truth to power in the traditional sense, but also speaking truth to the seemingly powerless, right? So my work is really trying to get these women to see themselves as much more than what our context has actually defined them, and the definition that even the West sometimes legislates against them and their bodies. And so for us, it's important that we include their voices to ensure that the current laws in Nigeria are aimed at empowering, that there's not this intentionality to keep women and the system broken in many ways, right? It's about bringing these voices to the table, ensuring that they have space at the table, and then breaking down some of the systems that are intentionally keeping them in this space of disempowerment.